So I'm a writer, and I used to produce some documentary films, which I still enjoy doing, but I don't do them very much anymore. I guess I've been in this battle, this movement battle, I call it, the movement itself for freedom, about as long as anybody. I caught fire in 1960. I discovered that some of the things that I'd been taught in school were wrong. In fact, diametrically wrong. And not only that, wrong on some very important issues. My first red pill actually happened to be with the United Nations. I came out of school, like most kids, I'd been taught that the United Nations was our last best hope for peace. And I believed that, and I believed that everybody was supposed to get together at the United Nations in this great international brotherhood and work out our problems around the conference table and instead of war. We're going to put an end to war and disease and intolerance and all those things. Never did I realize that it would turn out to be the greatest instrument for war and perhaps one of the greatest purveyors of disease than I could ever imagine. And when I began to read some stuff that challenged the narrative about the virtue of the United Nations, I was outraged. I thought, how could they possibly say that about this wonderful group, this organization? But I began to do a little research. I actually went down to the library in downtown Los Angeles, where I was working for a large corporation in Los Angeles, and it was located downtown. So one day I had some time, and I went into the library. Actually went into the library. Can you believe that? Since I came out of school, I thought I would never do that again. I thought going into the library and reading books was punishment for being a student. But I went, and I went to the international section and began to read some things about the United Nations. Most of it came from the UN itself. But as I was reading it, I got this sense that I was reading a pitch. Even then, I could tell the difference when I was listening to a sales pitch. And I began to check out some of the facts that they were portraying. Well, I found out that the facts were wrong, and they were propaganda, and I was outraged. I thought, how dare they tell me lies? And I then began to wonder, well, if they lied to me about the United Nations, what else could there be that I don't know about, that I should know about? So that was the beginning of my quest. It was a very small beginning. And the deeper I got into it, the more I realized that there were illusions all around my life and all around everyone's life. And as I went, I discovered more and more and more illusions that were part of my belief system that I had been indoctrinated to believe. And so I just became a very intense crusader, I guess is the word. I felt that these things were important, not just to me, but for everybody. In fact, it was impossible for me to enjoy the dreams of freedom and prosperity that I always had as a young man, and the dreams of independence and security for my family. All of those things were being attacked, and I didn't know it. And I knew that I couldn't defend myself alone. You can't fight this thing alone. You need the help of others. And so I became interested in spreading the word and trying to build an organizational pushback against it based on knowledge and education. And then finally, in 2002, I decided it was time to let others do the educational work. There are a lot of people doing good work in that field. And I decided to create a movement, if I could, that would be part of this organized pushback. That we could bring together people in unity who already had taken enough red pills to realize that their future was at stake. History has always been driven by 1% to 3% of the population, never the majority, I mean a huge majority, no. It's always that 1%, 3% that are the thinkers and the leaders and the organizers, and then the masses always follow. So I was looking for that 1 to 3% who would respond to the message of freedom and who understood what they were up against. They were not just saying, oh golly, what's happening in the world, and they really understood why and who. I wanted to create a movement for them to come together, to realize that they're not alone, and to realize the power of unity, and to push back and actually make a change in the world. I thought it was insane. I knew that this was a long shot, but if I didn't do it, who was going to do it? So fortunately, I wasn't alone. The minute I laid this plan in front of people, which was 2002, Freedom Force International was launched. I have been inundated with people coming from all walks of life, all around the world, all cultures, all nationalities, all religions, all races, all lifestyles, all economic status, everybody. There is a massive number of people out there, legions, who have taken these red pills, and they are looking for something where they could come together and make a difference and change the world, literally. That's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing. That's where I am in this journey that started way back in 1960. And I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but I'm just going to conclude it by saying, if any of you out there think you have taken the red pill and you understand the stakes that are involved here, our lives and our future and our freedom, I invite you to check us out. And you might want to come and join with us.
It must be refreshing for you to see this then. If you've been involved in this so long, and I mean, that must have been gut-wrenching sometimes and frustrating beyond belief, trying to wake people up.
Well, that journey has been long and arduous, and has been frustrating beyond belief. And yeah, in the beginning, back in 1960, through the 60s and 70s, there weren't many people who were really open to listening to the message. Things were good. I mean, things still are good, of course, but I mean, things were very good. There was no threat to one's liberty. We all had freedom of speech. There was none of this nonsense about you can't have freedom to speak because it's going to be classified as hate speech if you speak politically incorrect and so forth. None of that was then present, and so people felt very comfortable and secure. We here in America felt particularly secure because, well, other countries may have problems like that, but that'll never happen here, we thought. And so, yes, I did have a lot of opposition to my message, but with the passage of time and with the growing awareness that there is an expansion of statism, of the governments, the states of the world, but particularly here in America where we live, you know, we see that growth as the state power grows, individual liberty shrinks. And this is a trend, and if you could mentally plot it on a graph, you could see that we started off back in the beginning of the country where we had maximum, optimum freedom and very little government rules and regulation over our lives. We were free people. And every year, incrementally, you can see the rise of government and the decrease in freedom. Always supposedly for our own good, of course. This is for us, they say, and we generally buy into it. We want protection against terrorism and crime and pornography and all of these things, drugs in the street and all these things. The more threats you have, and some of them I believe now are manufactured threats because they know that the more people are afraid of these threats, the more willing they are to give up their liberty in the name of protection against these threats. And so we see that process going on, and if in your mind you can plot that on a graph, you can see that where we are now, we have reached a point in that progression where the size and reach of government control over our lives is extreme. I don't know what percentage it is, but I would place it somewhere around 80%. You can't do anything. You can't take a job. You can't go to school. You can't start a business. You can't sell anything without a government permit. You can't even get married without a license from the bloody government. I mean, everything we do has to be permitted by the government. And that process is continuing. It's getting exponential. And so plot that in your mind, and you can see that we are growing very close to the point where government control over our lives is not 80% or 85% or 90%, but 100%, and that is called totalitarianism. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on the rapid path to totalitarianism. So as we get closer to that point, it is now easier to talk about these things because more people see it, they feel it. So in a sense, it's refreshing to know that more people are open to this message, and that makes me very happy. But at the same time, we have to realize that the trend continues, and these are exciting times in which to live, I have to say, because I see that in our lifetime, these forces are coming together with such collision energy that one or the other will be obliterated. Which one it'll be, I think, will depend to a large extent of what we do.
You know what? You answered my next question. What's your gut feeling? What do you think's going to happen? Like if you had to put a wager on it?
I don't know. My gut feeling is that it is unknown. But my really deep gut feeling is that we can do it. That's the important thing. If I felt sure that we were going to do it, I'd probably relax and say, well, it's a given, right? We're going to do it. But that's not true. I think it's iffy. I kind of feel like where we were in the American Revolution when Washington crossed the Delaware. We were losing. There was no doubt that the revolution was going to fail. We were up against the most superior army in the world, the British Army. Our army was defeated. It had been defeated at numerous battles. We were running low on ammunition. The recruits were untrained. They weren't soldiers. They were just farmers. They were out of ammunition. They didn't have warm clothing. It was wintertime. They were freezing. They didn't have enough wood to keep the fires going. And there were people leaving. At January 1, most of the enlistments were to terminate, and everybody was going to go home. And so Washington turned to his men and said, men, I want you to stay with me one more time. We're going to do something outrageous. We're going to attack the enemy while he doesn't expect it. And so that's what they did. That was the Battle of Trenton. We defeated the British there. And from that point forward, it was a turn in the revolution. I think that our chances of victory are better than what George Washington's chances were at the Delaware when he crossed the Delaware. So that's my gut feeling, that we will cross the Delaware and we will win. But we can't just sit back and say, well, it's all written, so we don't have to worry about it.
I just want to get your thoughts on cryptocurrencies. I mean, because, you know, was it called the Monster from Jekyll Island? I guess was that what it's called? You know, like you know a lot about this. You must be. See, Max Egan gave me everybody's very hopeful, but he saw it as perhaps a method of control, and he made some really good points. I can't remember them now. How do you see crypto playing a part in well, in either way, like in our freedom or in our enslavement, or do you have an opinion on that?
Well, my views on the role of cryptocurrency in this freedom movement are somewhat parallel to my views on what my gut feeling is about are we going to be successful or are we going to be defeated? It could go either way right now, depending on us and how really dedicated we are, how much of a commitment we're ready to make in the battle. Cryptocurrencies have all the promises of doing a lot of good things, and that's the reason so many of us are attracted to it. But it also, there are some other factors, hidden factors up until recently that most people were not aware of, and that is that a cryptocurrency is likely to become, or would become, the basis for a cashless society, which has always been the goal of the globalists. They do not like people to have cash. Well, that's kind of a paradox, isn't it? How can cryptocurrencies, which are supposed to prevent government from having a way to get into our pocketbooks, and the government doesn't issue the money and all of that sort of thing, how can that be a cashless society? Wouldn't that be the new cash? Well, maybe and maybe not, and that is the very thing that we are facing now. The real serious students of this know that the banking industry, for at least, I'm going to say at least 4 years, 3 years or 4 years, have been very diligently funding and doing research on how to use cryptocurrencies for their goals. Meanwhile, most of us have been out there saying, oh, Bitcoin, all these wonderful crypto. Government can't touch us now. Meanwhile, government and the banks are working diligently behind the scenes, working to see a way to make that be the basis for their cashless society, and they're well progressed on that scale. We have to learn about that. I think anybody who's interested in cryptocurrencies must get their eyes off of all of this profit potential, which right now is sort of distracting. Oh my gosh, I got to get into this because I'm going to be left out. All my friends are making $100,000 in 1 week. I'm being left out, and that's where everybody's looking. You better get your eyes off of that. Not that that's not a good thing to do, and there are a lot of good things in cryptocurrency, don't forget, I believe in it, But don't focus on that to the exclusion of what's going on over here, because there are powerful forces who believe that they can use cryptocurrency to enslave you. You have to know about this side of it as well.